On the call with us. And Happy New Year. I think I can officially still say that until the end of this month, and then it's passé. So one of the reasons that Oasis invited us today to talk with you all about exemption certificates and tax automation for your Sage systems is, you know, as we're getting further and further into technology type of practices, you know, one of the key areas of business that can still be affected by using automation in your environment is managing your sales tax and your exemption processes. And Avalara has a terrific partnership with Oasis for Sage to be able to bring this type of a solution to you to be able to automate things. So I'm hoping that you can all see my screen. Jody, I'm gonna page down to the next one. So hopefully we're not having any technical difficulties with that. Let me know if we do. So today on our agenda, and I do want to make this interactive, so please go ahead and flag or add some questions to the chat if you do have something as I'm going through things. And what we really want to do is go through what your challenges are today, doing things in a manual way. And manual can mean many different things. A lot of the folks that we talk to think that they have a process in place and they use spreadsheets and they upload rate tables, and that's still a very manual type of a process when you've got something like Avalara that can come into play and truly automate and track the sales tax changes that you might be seeing across the different tax jurisdictions you're in today. So we're going to talk a bit about that. And how we can actually dive into that technology and once it's connected, how that helps you. And then we're just going to go through a couple of screenshot scenarios inside of Sage so that you just kind of get the gist of how the product works. And the overall goal today is to say, hey, here's a best practice heading into 2017 that you might want to consider to give back your IT staff some time, to give your finance teams back a little bit of their time, and really mitigate against an audit, just having the incorrect information, or in some cases, you know, the time it takes to get that information. So, and if you're feeling like, hey, this might be a good fit for us, then we can go into a more in-depth demo specific to your situation through Jody, through calling her team. So, challenges of tax compliance. I'm hoping everyone on the phone has a little bit of skin in the game when it comes to their tax compliance, and you understand, you know, the specifics, the basics, that it's just a statutory requirement for a business. It's not something you can get away from, and the rules around the compliance are constantly changing. If you're doing that in a manual way today, obviously, you know, you've found ways around the labor involved because, you know, everyone's doing it in some fashion already, but it's still costing your organization a lot of money in the time that you spend, and also the potential for error to be there, you know, whether it is or isn't, there's always that potential. The bigger your marketplace, the more you're trying to expand and grow, the more case that you might have, you know, error just trying to keep track of all those things. And it can become expensive if you have to, you know, employ multiple people to manage this process. If you have, and we're going to talk about the exemption certificates, if you've got multiple people in the organization, maybe customer service, maybe even your sales teams handling those exempt certificates, at the end of the day in an audit can become very expensive when you've got things kind of piecemealed out throughout the organization. So, you know, those are some of the challenges that you're having today. And again, of course, it's not something that's generating revenue for the organization. One of the things that helps you to kind of understand the difference between how you're doing it today, looking up a zip code, based or in difference to how Avalara does things in an automated fashion, is that we don't actually just use a zip code. That is something, you know, you can get that information, you can use a zip code today to determine what the sales tax could be, but it leaves you open for a lot of error. And again, if you're just managing sales tax in one state, perhaps not a big deal. But if you have multiple tax jurisdictions that you're working with, this is where it can become very complex, and how Avalara differs in its approach to delivering this in an automated way. So we're going to just look at an example to give you kind of an idea of what Avalara does and what challenges that some of you on the phone today might be facing, you know, on a monthly basis, just trying to track down the changes. So if we take a look at an example in Colorado, we like to pick on Colorado quite a bit, because you'll have multiple tax jurisdictions inside of a single zip code. So as an example, we're going to drill down even further here into what this could look like and what you're truly having to deal with. So inside of all of these different color codes are varying tax jurisdictions with different tax rates. But as you'll see, some of those colors actually cross over into the exact same zip code. So if you were to use a zip code rate base table, for example, in 80111 in Greenwood Village, you wouldn't necessarily know that there are two different tax rates unless either by way of audit or by way of one of your customers alerting you. You wouldn't necessarily know that you might be calculating sales tax incorrectly. In fact, this has 3 tax jurisdictions that flow into that same zip code. So if we drill down a little bit further into that very specific area, you're going to see that the different tax complexities for this one zip code in Colorado, there's 11 different tax assessments based on the different counties that fall into this single zip code. So if you're using a zip code rate table, you're not going to get the level of detail and the level of complexity for correctly assessing what sales tax should be for that area. And this is the issue that Avalara and our product AvaTax will address for you. So just determining that zip code rate table is a very inaccurate way of doing things. And again, we're showing Colorado as an example, but I was on the phone with a customer who has predominant business in Louisiana and Alabama, 2 very complicated states with home state rules where the different tax jurisdictions inside of the state itself vary, and it's very, very complex. So this might be something that applies to you as we're kind of going through the process. So, you know, recapping, today there's over 12,000 different tax jurisdictions. So if you looked at a map of the U.S., you would see all these little boundary lines all across the U.S. And these are the types of things that our team here at Avalara, specifically managing AvaTax, are going to be working for you and keeping those that data correct inside of our tax cloud. We see that this says thousands of changes. I think last year there were over 14,000 changes to the various jurisdictional rates, different tax holidays, new taxes, jurisdictions that are expanding. You know, internally, it could be because of a school district change. It could be because of a stadium. It could be because of a lot of different things. But those things are happening all the time and every day throughout the calendar year, and that's how it can become a very complex process for you guys to keep track of. So the other thing that is also very complex, if it's not bad enough just determining what the tax rate is for a particular tax jurisdiction, you also have products and services that could also have a complex level of taxability rules. So these are just some examples, and I'm not sure who's all on the phone today, the type of industries you're in, but if you fall into any of these type of industries, you know all too well that these are areas where there can be some complex level of taxability rules. And I like to use an example of a candy bar, because we're all consumers of candy bars. At some point in time we've eaten one, and when you buy it at the grocery store, we probably never noticed whether or not you were being taxed or not. But something just as simple as a candy bar as one small example of how taxes are applied on a product. Here we have a Milky Way. I mean, this is the same manufacturer, but The difference here in the taxability of something so simple as a candy bar is whether or not, and this is literally how the rule works, one has a flour component, it's considered food and it's non-taxable, or if it doesn't have a flour component, it's considered in the candy code and then it gets taxable. They're silly little things, and each and every single state is trying to maximize their revenue by how they treat and tax different products. So again, it's a simple little thing. We've probably never noticed whether or not there was tax on that candy bar we bought, but you'll look now, I'm sure, as I've done now every time. I even go to restaurants and look at the tax now because it's so crazy. So again, just some of the ways that Avalara can help you by understanding product taxability. We also understand the rules around the tax. So where does that tax have to happen? Is it based on where the product is getting shipped from or shipped to, or in some cases in California, if you actually have a nexus in that state and you're shipping into that state, then both ends of the transaction for that state will have tax applied in the case of California and Texas. So these are all things that our tax engine can help you automate. Once you've set these things up in the system, then you're done. So that kind of brings me to what we were talking about just a second ago in terms of how our system works with Nexus. So I don't know if this is something that you deal with every day, but I talk to customers of all different sizes and shapes and products, and some have internal accounting professionals, others have outside accounting professionals, and many of them don't know exactly where their nexus is today. And the reason for that is not because they don't understand, that they have a location specific somewhere or they have a salesperson somewhere, but the nexus rules and the nexus laws are changing across each and every state and tax jurisdiction on a regular basis. It's a #1 source of revenue for any state. So because of the e-commerce laws that are changing all the time, your organization may have nexus that you're not even aware that you've established because those laws change. And again, those are the types of things that when you automate through this type of system that we can help you with. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, as you can see, this came from Wakefield. We use a couple of research firms to help our own organization, make sure that we're managing and getting all the data that our customers, and challenges that you're dealing with. So I'm going to refer to a couple of different research papers that we use on a regular basis to kind of take the temperature, if you will, of what's going on. The next thing is whether or not the product itself is taxable or the customer themselves that you're dealing with are taxable. And we find oftentimes our Sage clients in particular will have a lot of manufacturing, so most of what you're doing is exempt from sales tax. But just because you're exempt, depending on your nexus, you still have to report those sales, but what you have to do then is be ready to show that exempt certificate, the reason why you didn't charge sales tax for that transaction. So one of the tools that Avalara has is our certificate capture tool, and that helps marry the tax calculation engine decision along with a lookup of whether or not you actually have the physical certificate to go along with that transaction. And that's a very challenging area for a lot of customers, especially Sage clients. So understanding that we have a tool for that and what those challenges are is kind of the direction we're going in helping you automate that process. So just take a look at a typical compliance process. Okay, you guys are probably going to laugh at this next couple of slides, but typically what happens today if you're doing it manually is that you're entering a tax rate that you've looked up somewhere, maybe online, maybe on a free website, maybe you have a routine that you look up, tax changes and have your IT folks upload those for you, but you're constantly having to make sure that you're keeping those up to date and that you're watching any changes that happen. So you're so you're constantly having someone as a resource internally doing that. And then basically what you're probably going to do, if we go back to my example of Colorado, is you're going to look at those rates, and you're just going to pick an average one. We talk to customers all the time that use the highest tax rate just to make sure that, you know, they're not missing anything. So you may be overcharging your clients, and that may or may not be a problem, but sometimes that does become a problem if you have customers where then they come back to you and say, hey, that's not the tax rate for my city, and then you've got to go back and make some changes. So again, when you start making these little changes and you start thinking about the time put in, you know, it can become a very complex type of a process. So for us, again, as a tax engine provider, to help you do these things manually, we take a look all the time, and this was published back in 2015, so pretty recent, at the time it takes an average accounting or finance department to deal with compliance. It's hours that you don't really understand that you're spending, but if you took those hours and took them across an annual structure, and you look and say, hey, what are we really doing? It's like, it's an hour here, 20 minutes there, and so forth. At the end of the day, it can really add up. So we took a poll. We took a look at, okay, what are the tasks involved of compliance? So looking up taxability changes, any return prep and filing, of course, responding to auditor requests, and managing just an audit process in general. And again, that could be across one tax jurisdiction or many. Managing your exemption certificates, and again, this might be something as simple as you having to call your salespeople and saying, hey, I don't have that exemption certificate yet, and we've had product that's shipped out the door, and we have an audit coming up. And again, just all these little components that fill in these hours that you spend on an annual basis. Researching Nexus, a lot of companies aren't even really doing this as a general rule, and that's where companies are getting tripped up a little bit with new Nexus laws that are coming out. And then just managing in general their use tax requirements. That's a big deal. If you have a lot of invoices that you're paying, you're managing to that. So again, looking over a small or medium-sized type of a business, the average is about 302 hours annually, and that's lost productivity to the organization. If we take a look a little bit deeper, because we like to do that, we want to quantify that by taking a look at, if we go from these same hours and translate those to kind of the average cost of a person doing those same activities, then you can quickly see that you know, the cost associated when you put a number to it is pretty hefty for an organization. And if you're a small to mid-sized organization and you're spending this kind of money and this kind of time, even if it's across multiple people, then you can clearly see that there is probably a good cause for taking a look at automating some of these processes. And it doesn't have anything to do at all with the actual audit itself and what that might find in the organization and the time that is spent, you know, maybe even taking the audit results and having to fight against those. We have customers that come to us that have had negative audits where it goes back a couple of years, and they're looking at using our tools to kind of help with that risk. So when you start looking at what the true cost is for your organization, even in a small company, between the hours that you spend, I'm sure that most of you on the phone, you know, if you looked hard and fast at this internally, you would find that you're probably falling somewhere in between these two, or maybe even more. So again, these are the types of things that automating these processes can completely eliminate. And again, it's a cost of doing something that, you know, doesn't bring any additional revenue to your company, but it certainly can take away those profits at the end of the year if there's negative assessments. So we're going to take a look at this one that always makes me laugh because I can't even read all these things fast enough. But someone in compliance managing this day-to-day, monthly process is, I saw start crying. Wait, sometimes I have to go back because it cracks me up. So each and every day there's a new set of things that you're having, new set of challenges that you're having to overcome, and some days maybe even all of those. And if you're in the middle of an audit, it gets a little bit crazy. And I know that we're painting a really big, audacious picture, but at the end of the day, it is something that companies are coming to us and saying, hey, maybe it's time to take a look at getting this completely off our plate. So the way that Avalara can help is through our end-to-end compliance tools. So we have 3 different tools that can help businesses like yours manage this compliance process and basically take it off your plate. And you have a choice. Each of these different tools, it comes as a package, or you can simply just use the ones that are more relevant to your organization. Most of our Sage customers do have certificates that they're managing today, but just to give you a rundown, AvaTax. What you get with AvaTax, which is literally, and I'll show it to you here as a screenshot example inside of Sage in a moment, what you're going to get is the ability to never have to call the Department of Revenue ever again, never have to look up another tax rate ever again, and Avalara is going to basically supersede all of that and take over that tax decision process for you. The things that we do inside of our system that make us unique and that make this really a bulletproof type of a tax decision engine, and by the way, we put that in writing, that we guarantee our tax rates. You have an address validation step. Most of our customers find this coming in very handy when they have to deliver product, because we're validating an address. It's part of determining where the sales tax needs to be applied, but it also is a side benefit of knowing that you actually have verified an address for shipping, so it's great. We're going to take into consideration where the tax has to happen, destination, etc. We're going to take, and we're going to add to the address, we're going to add a latitude, longitude coordinate. That basically gives us a rooftop. If we were looking at a map and putting a pin in the map, it gives us a rooftop level determination of exactly where the transaction is happening, where your customer is located, and how and where the tax jurisdiction boundaries lie and what the tax needs to be for that transaction. We're going to take a step to help you map your products to our tax rules so that each and every time you go to invoice, you're going to have accurate taxability, and if there's any changes, you don't have to worry about looking it up, because 1, we're going to alert you, and 2, it's going to happen automatically in the cloud. Even something today that may not have tax, but you know that it has different tax rules in different jurisdictions, if that changes, then Avalara is also going to pick that up automatically for you. And then the host of reports that come from this, because we're going so deep into the taxing jurisdiction, you can get up to 8 levels deep of tax information on a report that says you collected, your customer will see a tax of, say, $13. But what's going to happen on the reporting side is you're going to have literally all the tax broken out by every single tax jurisdiction that's in effect for a particular area. So if there's a limited tax for transportation, if there's a special tax, municipal or tax that's being applied right now in that jurisdiction, and any other changes, you're going to see those all broken out, because that's going to give you the ability to correctly, at the end of the month, just go ahead and make the put that information on your forms and file. Cert Capture is a unique product. We give you a whole host of tools around managing your exemption certificates. So what this provides is 2 really key things. The first thing is that we have a connection to the tax engine software. So when Sage is delivering, you're setting up an invoice and you've selected a customer and it's flagged as exempt, then immediately AvaTax adds 1 extra step to all these steps, and it reaches over here to the Cert Capture tool and says, hey, do I have this customer's flagged as non-taxable? Do I have a certificate on file? And whatever that answer is, that happens in the fraction of a second, you'll also have the ability then of either it will attach the certificate to that transaction on the back end. Again, it's for audit purposes. Or it's going to say there's no certificate, and it's going to launch into a wizard. That wizard is something that is a very streamlined process. Basically takes the customer's data with the address that you're going to be delivering, the ship to address. It pre-populates that on the actual exemption certificate that you would need to have for this transaction. So our system's smart enough to say, oh, we know where we see the address. It's going to pre-populate the customer's information. It's going to have two dynamic fields. It's going to have the certificate number field and the signature field that are going to be looking for information. And if the customer, the wizard pops up and says, here's your certificate, sign it and put in your number. And if for any reason either of those two fields are left blank, the wizard isn't going to let that customer go ahead and send that certificate back to you. It's going to alert the customer, hey, you forgot to sign. We also know the naming convention based on the state that the certificate is for, what the first, what the prefix is, if you would, for the certificates in that particular state. Our forms know that. So it would be looking for the correct number. And if it's not the correct number and they start to add some business license or some other number, our form is also going to stop them and say that is not the correct number. In states, I'll go one step further, which is a great feature of our tool. In states that have a link to verify certificates, that means can you actually tell if this customer's certificate is valid for that state? If the state has it and it's posted online, then we also have a link that is connected to cert capture that allows that additional validation step. So as just a quick recap, you're not only getting the tax engine software as part of this process, but you're also able to launch a wizard, collect the right certificate, and then we provide an archival type of a process, and then a way for you to reach out to your customers on a regular basis. Perhaps if you have customers in Florida, those certificates need to be updated on an annual basis. Every state has their own rules, and our tool just helps you put a process in place for that. And finally, the third leg of the stool, if you will, is our returns. So if we are managing your if we are the tax engine in place, these reports will also fill into our tax return process. And then you would actually have a live person. This is an outsourced type of a process and methodology. So you actually have a person filing the returns for you based on your filing calendars that we would set up in advance. And it's basically like you would set up your payroll process today. So we would put all the data in the system up front. You have a person that's managing that, and then you'll get a report monthly that shows this is the liability that you have based on each of the individual states. You'll have tons of reports you can look at. You'll have ample time to make changes, do credit and rebills. And at the end of the day, though, Avalara is taking the liability for filing on time for you. And then we provide, again, a repository for those forms. And then part of our service, too, is managing the notifications that you get from the various states. From time to time, our customers will get a state asking about a particular return. All you do is take that notification, send it to your returns person, and they will contact the state on your behalf, resolve the issue, collect the data, get them the information, and you're good to go. So I'm going to stop there for just a second. Jody, is anybody, are there any questions up to this point?
I haven't seen any questions so far.
Okay. No worries. Hopefully, hopefully everyone's getting a little bit of something or taking a look, you know, internally and saying, hey, yeah, we kind of do that, or we have that problem. Again, you know, this is meant to be just kind of a general, what are the best practices out there today that companies are engaging? To move forward, and again,
Angela, we just had a question pop in. and we may be getting to this later in the demo, how are these solutions priced?
Oh, absolutely. So we are not a one-size-fits-all. We are a subscription-based provider. So what that means is for every one of our customers, we can take a look at your actual volume. And so this is a good place to actually talk about that. When you understand how it works is that you have, for example, you have Sage, right? This is your software platform. So when you have that connector in place and you're replacing that tax lookup table with Avatax, then every time you go to invoice your client, then that would be considered a transaction. Now you can have up to 1,000 line items on a transaction or an invoice. We're going to interchange those two words. But based on the number of times in an annual year that your Sage system would call our tax engine, that's the tier that we put you in. So we're very affordably based in how we approach this business. We make it very easy, so it's a cost per transaction based on the annual number of transactions or committed invoices that you would commit to the GL that that your organization would have. And we have different tiers starting anywhere from as few as 250, because we have customers that have $1 million transactions. They might not have very many of them, but they're big ticket. We have other clients that use us that literally produce millions of transactions annually that need that accurate tax rate. So it's priced based on a tier, based on specifically your organization and how many invoices you do annually. And that's something that if this is, you know, something that you're interested in, and we can talk offline with Jody and actually go through a specific demo to your company and actually get you a budgetary quote based on some of that criteria. So hopefully that answers your question in a broad stroke. Again, how the engine works is here Avatax would be, and I'll show you again in 1 second. You have the Sage system sitting here. Avatax connector you would call the cloud while you're creating that invoice. It would deliver back that same information, and simultaneously in real time all that tax data is collected in your admin portal for Avatax so that you can run a bunch of different types of reports, and then at the end of the day you can either file the returns on your own or you can hire Avalara to file those returns for you. And then that data again is stored back into your admin console, into your cloud solution for Avalara, and you have access to that data in real time. So if you get an audit, whatever the case may be, you need your hands on that data, you've got it at your fingertips. Exemption certificates, I know I stopped a moment ago and just kind of explained it, how it works, but again the idea is to automate that exemption process and keep those certificates not in a shared folder and not in a file cabinet, but actually in the cloud and connected to the tax decision engine so that you can readily get that in the event of an audit, and you've got all the sales data associated with that certificate, you know, married together at all times. So again, it allows you the renewal of the certificate process, being able to collect those through using a wizard, a repository, and then if you have, I don't know if we have anyone on the phone, if you have e-commerce or retail, we do have that happen quite a bit where you'll have your customers who are exempt able to actually walk into a physical location and pick product. We actually have very specific for retail and e-commerce tablet versions of that certificate capture tool, so sometimes that helps. Going into a specific demo, again, we're just going to use screenshots today. We're trying to just give you the big picture, and then we can go into a little more detail down the road or specific to your business. So basically, inside of Sage, today what you have in the tax schedule is that you would have here, you would be looking up specific tax rates based on tax tables associated that have been uploaded and that you have to continually update. Once you put Avalara in place, the tax schedule is simply replaced with the word AvaTax, but behind the scenes is a code that basically tells the software, Sage, to reach out to the tax cloud, and then we're going to take all this data into account when we turn back over that tax decision. So again, this is really highly simplified, but it is a fairly simple process to eliminate tax rate tables and go with an Avalara type of a solution. And then we were talking a little bit about that address validation step, and again, it's only a screenshot, but it still shows you this is the original data that we pulled up inside of the system, and this is not really compliant right now with U.S. Postal Code. So the minute, and in the setup process, you're either going to do perhaps an address scrub of all the data, or you may be doing it, you know, ad hoc as you're adding different customers or different new locations. But what Avalara is going to do is going to take all the data in these fields, and in that split second, it's going to validate that. It's going to actually reformat it with the U.S. Postal Code standards in mind, and it's going to deliver back the zip +4, and it's going to add that latitude longitude coordinate to the transaction so that we can definitely determine exactly where it falls. So that's just, again, it's a screenshot, but you can see how it changed where the accounting department needs to be at the top line and how the address falls, zip +4. It does little things like if customers type in the entire word drive, and it should just be DR because that's U.S. Postal Standards, etc. And this is really great for shipping, you know, having that correct address. So that's part of the process. And then in terms of the invoice entry, and just again again, this is just the overview. When we go into the real demo, I can actually show you, you know, adding some line items and doing this in a live environment. But just to give you the gist of it, so you're adding your individual line items, and as you do that, there's a fraction of a second that happens where it's calling the tax engine, and for each of these line items, then what you're going to get is the specific tax applied and how that tax breaks out. So it really gives you a very detailed level of sales tax, and again, if we only have you know, one state, that's not going to be very complex. But if you're doing transactions over multiple tax jurisdictions, and you've got Nexus or delivery trucks and things that have you doing business in these various states, then this is going to be something that at the end of the month that your folks are spending a lot of time breaking out, because you're only going to get, with a tax zip code, you're only going to get the basics, and you're not going to get all of this broken out the way that AvaTax will do it for you automatically. So again, just thinking about the way that we do things and how we deliver each of these different products, think of it like outsourcing your payroll. I used that example earlier. We allow you to alleviate the costs associated with, putting together that data and managing your monthly and annual costs associated with audits, and focusing on the things that are, making your organizations more profitable and stronger. So just think of it like you're outsourcing. Again, Avalara, if this kind of comes into play if you look at how we started it as our tax cloud service, because we've only ever offered our services in the cloud. And from the beginning, we saw the pain that the small, medium-sized companies were going through with, lack of enough people, not having full tax departments like some of these huge organizations. And so our goal has always been to deliver the fastest, easiest, most accurate, and most affordable way. So that's why when we're talking of pricing, and when we look individually with each of you folks, if you're interested in looking at pricing, that's why each one can be married to the exact usage of of our different products. So it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it makes it very easy to implement, especially through our partners here at Oasis. They've been through many Avatax implementations, and they know exactly what to do. And we do all the heavy lifting here at Avalara anyway, so it makes it very easy to get yourselves up and running. Our average integration time frame is usually a 30 to 60 day window, and that really just depends on how much testing you need, but 30 days is generally it. So that's just kind of it in a nutshell. We have a couple more minutes, this like last 10 or 15 minutes. If there are more questions or any other things that I can answer, let me know.
Angela, we have a question. How long does it normally take to get set up with Avatax for Sage 100?
Yes. So generally speaking, again, our connector is already pre-built and certified and tested, and we have many customers using it. So generally speaking, it takes about 30 days. What that 30 days consists of, and if it sounds like we might want to go through a very specific product demo with your organization, but within that 30 days, basically, we're going to be doing, you're going to get the license key, you're going to set up the company structure, we're going to interface that connector and replace where I was showing you earlier. I can go back up real quick. We're going to replace the tax tables with that Avatax code. Most of that stuff takes, maybe a week. Really, we say 30 days only because we know that you guys are very busy and that you don't always have time to just sit down and focus on one project, that you're juggling lots of projects. But generally speaking, once you set up the company, you're going to go through a product code mapping session with our tax expert. You're going to work with Oasis to set up that connector, and basically what that means is they're going to set up a sandbox environment for you. And then once they turn on that connector inside of Sage, you're basically going to have the rest of that 30 days after you've done your mapping, which can take a day or two, to just run sample tests. And then you're going to have an opportunity, up front to say, when do we want to cut over? When do we want Avatax to start? Most of our customers try to start at the beginning of a month. As long as we have a full month worth of tax data, we can file for you in that month, starting on the very next month, as long as we've got that one full month. But yeah, 30 days is generally speaking about the right timetable. And that would include, by the way, exemption certificates if you're using that tool. Again, it might be a little bit different. Each and every company we work with, you might have 10,000 certificates. So we might want to engage our internal cert capture team. We have a managed resources team that help customers that have average of 5,000 or more exemption certificates, run campaigns and get those certificates loaded into the system. But yeah, that's a little different for everyone, but that's really generally the basic 30 days. Any other questions?
Thank you, Angela. I don't see any other questions at this time. Give it about 5 seconds. If anybody wants to ask a question, please raise your hand or put that in the chat window, and I can unmute you and you can discuss with Angela directly. Doesn't look like we have any takers, Angela. You did a pretty overall good job of explaining the particulars of Avatax and cert capture and the returns portion. As Angela said during the demonstration today, if you're interested in a more personalized demonstration or evaluating these solutions for your company, you can simply reach out to me. This is Jody Patterson. My email address is Jody, Jody, at oasisky.com. I think I've worked with everybody who's on this webinar today, so you probably already have my contact information. Just reach out to me directly and let me know that you would like more information, and we can put together a budgetary proposal and a customized demonstration for you and your company. Angela, thank you so much for your demo today, and everyone have a good day and a good week.
Thanks so much, Jody. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate your time. Take care.